I'm profoundly grateful today for this honor, and I humbly accept it, but not for myself, but on behalf of all animal rights activists like Chris DeRose and everyone else in this room. Animal rights activists like you are the bravest of all first responders, because you confront a deeply entrenched status quo of vested interests, industry, politics, and culture. You are Lincoln's better angels of our nature and the beacon on the hill. And a day will dawn when civilization will owe you a debt of gratitude it could never repay. Now, they say that behind every successful man, there's a very surprised woman. So my debt of gratitude tonight is for my long-suffering, beloved wife, Trix. Now, Rudyard Kipling, writing of young men dying in World War I, said, "And if they ask you why we died, tell them that our fathers lied." That legacy of lies continues today. Everything we think we know about the meat and dairy industry is a preposterous lie. You see, the world is crying out today for only two things: leadership and the truth. Civilized people always tell the truth. The wise Chinese have a term for it: zhengjiao. Listen to the friend who tells you the truth, even when it hurts. So let's just tell the truth, fearlessly and forcefully. That is what the Sanskrit word satyagraha means, the truth force. Now, Brendan Kennelly in the book of Judas wrote, "If you want to serve your age, betray it." But what does that mean, to betray your age? It means expose its lies, humiliate its conceits, debunk its arrogance, and condemn them to face harsher truths. Alvin Toffler said that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Now, I have long admired Count Moltke, the great Prussian general, a soldier who preferred to think rather than speak, a man silent in 7 languages. You see, it takes courage to stand up and speak. It also takes courage to sit down and listen. So what made me decide as a young investment banker to leave the world of lobsters and Learjets in exchange for shelters and slaughterhouses? To decide to take nothing but pictures, own nothing but memories, leave nothing but footprints, kill nothing but time. You see, something happened to me. I had been to Dante's Inferno, but unlike Dante Alighieri, I did not have Beatrice for my love, nor Virgil for my guide. I heard the screams of my dying father as his body was ravaged by the many cancers that killed him. And I realized I'd heard those screams before. In the slaughterhouse, on the cattle ships to the Middle East, and a dying mother whale as a harpoon explodes in her brain as she calls out to her calf. Their cries were the cries of my father. They were identical. And I discovered that when we suffer as equals. And in their capacity to suffer, a dog is a pig, is a bear, is a boy. So, when I look into your beautiful faces here tonight, I recall the words of the Greek poet Horace: "Change only the name, and my story is also about you." Now, in human history, only 100 billion human beings have ever lived. 7 billion people are alive today, and we human beings torture and kill 2 billion sentient, living, loving animals every week. 2 billion a week. We stab and suffocate 1 billion ocean animals every 8 hours. 1 billion every 8 hours. If human beings were killed at the same rate, we would be wiped out in one weekend. Trillions of fish are ground up into pellets to feed to livestock. Vegetarian cows are now the world's largest ocean predators. Now, the great astrophysicist Carl Sagan's picture from Voyager's spacecraft showed the tiniest microscopic pinhole from space, a pale blue dot suspended on a sunbeam. That's what he called it. A pale blue dot suspended on a sunbeam. Well, human beings now comprise 30% of the mass of all land animals. Slaughter farm animals comprise 66%, and natural wild animals are only 4%. We have turned Carl Sagan's pale blue planet Earth into blood-stained planet slaughterhouse. You see, the oceans are dying in our time. By 2048, all our fisheries will be dead, the lungs and the arteries of the earth. And if any of my algorithms are correct, and they all are, it means that no child under the age of 5 is ever going to reach retirement age. It is a mathematical impossibility. If that does not chill your blood. 10,000 entire species are wiped out every year because of the actions of one species, and we now face the 6th mass extinction in cosmological history. And the meat industry is killing us too, with cancers, diabetes, heart disease, and many other diseases. And it is deforesting the planet, poisoning the oceans, draining the rivers and aquifers, and bankrupting global economies. If any other organism did this, a biologist would call it a bloody virus. It is a crime of unimaginable proportions. Now, the great anthropologist Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a few committed people can change the world. Indeed, that is the only thing that ever has." Well, look at the numbers. There are only 13 million Jews in the world, and they play such a vibrant role in international affairs. Just look at the number of Nobel Prizes they win every year. Trix and I sat in the stadium during the Olympic Games full of pride as Australia, with a population less than Florida, won more medals than every country in the world except for the United States and Russia. Tibet's population is only 3 million, but who hasn't heard of the plight of the Tibetan? But there are over 600 million vegetarians and vegans in the world, and that is bigger than the United States, England, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Canada, Australia, Israel, New Zealand, all put together. If they were one nation, they would be bigger than the 27 nations of the European Union. They are bigger than NATO. They are bigger than OPEC. And despite this massive demographic footprint, they are still drowned out by the raucous hunt and shoot and kill and cretins who believe that violence is the answer when it should not even be a question. 1 billion people today are hungry. 20 million people will die this year from malnutrition. Cutting meat by only 10% will feed 100 million people, and going vegan will end malnutrition forever. And food prices are skyrocketing. It used to cost me for Thai rice for my projects in Southeast Asia, $197 a ton. And then it went up to $1,015 a ton, a 5-fold increase in 5 months. And as we travel around the world to our projects in many countries, we see these poor countries sell their grain to the West for hard currency, whilst their own children starve in their arms, and the West feeds it to livestock. So we can eat a steak, I bet I'm not the only one in the room who sees this as a crime.
It's a crime.
Every morsel of meat we eat is slapping the tear-stained face of a hungry child. When I look into her eyes, do I remain silent?
No.
If everyone ate a Western diet, we would need 2 planet Earths to feed us. We've only got one, and she is dying. The Earth can produce enough food for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. Now, you would know there are 2 peak predators on this planet: humans on land and orcas on the ocean. In the 20th century, human beings killed 200 million members of their own species. Orcas killed none. And don't expect any protection from your own governments either. In the 20th century, 100 million people have been killed by their own governments. Now, Victor Hugo said there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. But I say there is nothing more destructive than a bad idea whose time has passed. The time for meat has passed. Now, 20 years ago, I have to tell you, the world is changing, and much of it is for the better. About 20 years ago, Twitter was a bird sound. www was a stuck keyboard. Cloud was in the sky. Skype was a typo. 3G was a parking space. Google was a baby's burp. And Al-Qaeda was my plumber. Now, the most beautiful word ever written in any country, in any language, at any time in human history came from India, from the Upanishads 3,000 years ago. Ahimsa, non-violence to any living being. And it's a beautiful word, not because it describes our nationality, our politics, our religions, our diet, or our lifestyle, but because it describes our character. It says we reject violence wherever and whenever it occurs. It is a revolutionary event more powerful than the Industrial Revolution, the Reformation, the Hubble telescope, or anything ever conceived by Galileo, Copernicus, Einstein, Darwin, or Freud. Because it protects the most precious of all things, life. People in this room are creating the new Enlightenment, the second Renaissance. Now, everyone here would probably know the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which goes back to the New Testament of Jesus, but actually goes back further still to the Babylonian Jew Hillel. In fact, it goes back even further than that, to the Analects of Confucius, 500 years BC. The truth be told, it was enshrined on the human heart long before the dawn of writing. So I say that veganism is the Swiss Army knife of a future. One instrument solves our ethical, economic, environmental, water, and health problems and ends animal cruelty forever. I recently delivered some speeches in the Senate in The Hague, in the Israeli Knesset Parliament in Jerusalem, and I also addressed the World Parliament of Religions. And I said, veganism gives us the peace dividend. The peace map is drawn on a menu. Peace is not just the absence of war, it is the presence of justice. So talking about peace while still killing animals is like loving literature and still burning books. They are mutually exclusive ideas. So, in my journey through Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, I've learned that a man is measured not by how much money he makes, but by how much of it he's willing to give away, particularly to strangers. And if you wish to increase a man's share of happiness, do not aim to increase his possessions. Simply decrease his desires. So Socrates and Epicurus were right. The unexamined life is not worth living. It's not a life, it's a life sentence. And I learned that you do not find your character on Wall Street because it lives on the road to Damascus. And my heart resonates to the words of W.H. Auden. If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. But all this takes courage. Martin Niemöller, the German priest, philosopher, and U-boat captain, spent 8 years in prison for condemning German intellectuals for being cowards. And he wrote, "When the Nazis came for the communists, I remained silent. I was not a communist. When they locked up the Democrats, I remained silent. I was not a Democrat. When they came for the trade unionists, I did not speak out. I was not a trade unionist. When they came for the Jews, I remained silent. I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out." Men and women of integrity like you in this room must speak out and act courageously. Is it not better to light a candle than to curse the darkness? All the darkness in the world cannot put out the light of a single candle. You see, I believe another day is dawning, and if I close my eyes, I can feel her heartbeat. So let's not relive history, let's make history, because that is what leaders do. They make history. That is what people in this room do. They make history. Judge White's closing words in The Bonfire of the Vanities were these: "The law is humanity's attempt at decency." So I ask you all to join us in a battle, in a war that decency cannot afford to lose. Because in the end, only three things matter: how deeply you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things that were not meant for you. Meat was not meant for you. Ladies and gentlemen, the brutes and the bullies have been Goliath, but David is coming. Maybe he's in this room. Maybe he's one of you. And if not you, who? And if not now, when? So I'll leave you with the words that my mother read to me when I was a little boy. The same words I use every year for the last 12 years as I launch the Sea Shepherd campaign against the Japanese whalers in Antarctica. Christopher Robin is reading to Winnie the Pooh. If ever there is a tomorrow when we are not together, there is something you must always remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. But most importantly, even if we're apart, I'll always be with you. Thank you.